Hello, everybody, and welcome to the February Alloy Community Call. So today we're going to jump in. We don't have any, I don't think we have any predetermined topics, but we'd love to open the floor to anyone who does have a topic. You can either add it in chat, raise your hand, unmute yourself in chat, talk, whatever you want to. I'll give a few minutes here to see if anybody has anything they want to talk about. This can be questions. This can be like, hey, what about our proposal? It's pretty wide open. We can even take a look at, if you have an issue, more than happy to dig into anything. So I'll open the floor.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, jump in.
How closely, if at all, does the Alloy team work with the Hotel teams?
Hey, Sam, I think you'd be a great person for that. Why don't you give yourself a little background there?
So I'm Sam. I've been working with OpenTelemetry for a few years at a last position, and now here with Grafana and Alloy. But recently became an approver in the collector SIG. Outside of Alloy, we also have a few other Grafana members who are maintainers or approvers in other SIGs than the collector. So I would say we work somewhat consistently upstream. We're a pretty small team, so there's a balance always to what we're able to do upstream versus working on in Alloy only or Alloy first. But yeah, we're very committed to being good members of the OpenTelemetry community.
Cool. I think as I'm implementing Hotel in my app and then deploying Alloy to get it into Grafana and all the things, sometimes I just have that question of like, is this an Hotel question or an Alloy question?
You're always welcome to ask it within the Alloy spaces, and if it is something that makes more sense to be in a different space, we'll redirect, but we'll help where we can as well. So
cool. It seems like, at least in the Grafana Labs community Slack, Alloy is definitely one of the more responsive channels right now. I've tried to ask questions in some other channels, and it seems like crickets, even though they have more members. So I appreciate the Alloy community. All that to say.
Awesome. Love to hear that. Yeah, we don't. So one thing that is different is we do not support every component that like Hotel Contrib has in it. So there's a possibility that there could be some differences there. Part of that's just support cost, because when we say we pull it into Hotel, we pull it from Hotel into Alloy, that means we have to support it and build documentation around it. And we trickle those out as we kind of on customer request or just requests from the community.
Sure.
But in general, we try to be, like Sam said, good stewards.
Is there a continuing effort to bring a little bit Grafana agent, but more so like Promptail documentation into the Alloy documentation site?
We should. We probably have reference documentation. We have traditionally had issues with. We try to be very good on like reference, like the nuts and bolts, but not necessarily on the how-to side. So that's something we, us and especially Clayton, who's kind of our doc writer, is really keen on. Now, granted, we've been saying that since Alloy was released, but
it's always documentation.
Struggle. Yeah, Paulin?
I didn't quite understand the question. Which parts of the Promptail documentation do we need to bring over?
I've just noticed there's a lot of existing documentation on Promptail, examples, how-tos. Some of it's in forums, which you can't really migrate that. But just when I'm trying to figure out something in Alloy, there's been occasion where I'm like, I don't really see this, and then I go searching for Grafana agent or Promptail, and then I can find the answer.
Okay, it's interesting. I personally didn't realize there was so much in the Promptail docs that wasn't in the Alloy docs. I thought the Promptel. I thought that when people were porting all the Promptel code to Alloy and the agent, they just used the same examples, the same config entries and so on. Might be worth double checking then if there's anything missing.
Yeah, and I can't think of a specific example right now. But Alloy is my first time using, like, I'm not migrating from Promptail or from Grafana agent. Like, Alloy is my first time doing anything other than Prometheus. So trying to figure out how to get logs into Loki and traces into Tempo and what is a log and what is a trace. All of that has been a fun learning curve. So yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about the internet, is that the old documentation, the old questions are there that we can search for and can find the answers.
As you're investigating, if you do find anything that was clear in the Promptail docs or in the agent docs and not clear in the Alloy docs, if you want to bring that up either in the Slack channel or as a GitHub issue, we appreciate that just for tracking, because there's only so much we can internally find that is, we're never going to have the same experience as a user. And especially Promptail was deprecated in the latest Loki release, so there's going to be more and more Promptail users starting to look at Alloy.
Sure. I can't remember if anyone else's stuff. I don't know if I'm the only user here and everyone else is on the team, or I don't want to dominate the conversation, but one issue I've noticed just in setting it up is that so our architecture, we have the Alloy agent on all of our primary services, but we also have like a dedicated Alloy server, which is a proxy into Prometheus, Loki, and Tempo. And for that proxy server, the OTel receiver, OTLP, that supports TLS, but both the Prometheus, I forget if they're receivers or collector, what the name is, but both the Prometheus and the Loki components of Alloy don't support TLS, whereas Loki itself and Prometheus itself do support TLS. And so our Loki, Prometheus, and Tempo servers are behind firewalls and VPCs, so we're not as concerned about exposing those, ironically. But Alloy is like the one public facing port for all of the ingests, and it would be really nice if both the Prometheus and the Loki ports could support TLS. So I don't know if that's on a roadmap. I don't remember if I created GitHub issues or commented on GitHub issues for those.
Offhand, I think you're specifically probably talking about the Prometheus receive HTTP. That roughly sounds like
Yes.
the right name. Yeah, I know we have issues for adding more configuration and auth in general around Alloy core, if you will, like, localhost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know if we have anything around the actual HTTP.
Yeah, so the Prometheus receive HTTP and then the Loki source API.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm real quick and see.
Yeah, go ahead and search that. I'd say those definitely sound like valuable things that you would certainly not be the only user interested. So if there's not an issue, we should make one. We have a new member of the team joining somewhat soon, and a couple other open positions. Those sound like great early tickets to put to someone who's relatively new to the team. So we'll make sure those get added to that list of good first issues for the folks who are joining.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Paul.
So I just realized Piotr had raised an issue for this. Just found it.
Oh, awesome. Look at that. I could not find it. Oh, well.
Yeah. By the way, I've been wondering whether we should make a security label on Git, because I've been interested in working on these kinds of security related tools. It would be really nice to just generally improve security posture, harden alloy a little more. Yeah, it would be nice to have a label, and just so we can pick up these kinds of things and find them more easily. Hopefully no bad guys will find them.
I mean, we should be able to control those labels. Oh, this is- oh, that's done. All right, sorry. Why I couldn't find it is apparently if I look up receive HTTP, I don't see it. But if I add a Prometheus.receive HTTP, I do find it. So I'm not sure if it's because it's in a code block in the title or if it's only looks for like whole words. But yeah, if you want to give that a thumbs up or add a comment, Sean, that is something we can, we can look at when we do kind of our planning. And, we do look at like how many comments or how many thumbs up something has. And I would say, unless Matt or Jose wants to jump in, if you got more questions, just fire them off.
I do, but I'll just post it on the GitHub. It's more RFC syslog ingest pipeline, or we use that. We use RF syslog, sorry, in the locomotive industry, in the train industry, for the communications between the radios that are installed on it. And we've had some good success, but it's a little bit, the way our approach is a bit tedious, but I want to make sure before I ask that I've done my due diligence.
I mean, if you want to chat about it right now is a good time. If you think you need to do some research, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think let me do, because the way I have it right now is it involves a lot of regex. I'm not liking that. So let me do my research and then I'll post back. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. When you do, feel free to just ping it in the channel that we talked about it.
Thanks.
And, I generally, if somebody comes to community call and brings up an issue, that's more likely, more engagement. We're more likely to take a look at it, to be honest.
Okay, I think I did see Sean, somebody posted something about syslog recently on the channel. Let me
There
look.
was a user who was trying to figure out how to parse syslog messages out of journal D. I think that was
Yes.
the most recent one.
Yep, that was the one. Let me see. Theirs was RFC
5424 or 3160. I can't remember.
Is that the one you just added, Sam?
Um,
Didn't you just add something for?
It was a feature for RFC 3164 where the spec says that there's no year in the timestamp, and the default behavior then is just leave it at 0, which apparently Loki does try to handle, but the user was interested in it being handled in Alloy in the syslog parser. So I added that, but I also recently added the OpenTelemetry syslog receiver and exporter as well. So I've touched syslog a lot in the last month or two.
Oh, nice. Okay, I think ours is 5434. So there has been some work done for 5434.
Yeah, it's supported both in the Loki syslog parser and in the OpenTelemetry syslog receiver. Should be pretty widely supported. If there's any specific issues you run into, let us know. I know one of the reason we brought in both, we had the Loki version for a while, and we brought in the OpenTelemetry one recently, is that they handle, due to the nature of the Loki model versus the OpenTelemetry model, they handle the structured metadata differently. So depending on how heavy your usage is of that, you may want to consider one versus the other. But like you said, you had some research to do. If you want to do more of a write-up or a conversation in the channel later, happy to do that. Or if you have specific questions now, that's great too. But it should be supported.
Okay. Let me peruse the documentation, yeah, and then I'll post in the channel. Thanks.
Yeah. One other thing that I had a request for that is not currently supported is having one port receive both 3164 or 5424 and figure it out on the fly. I don't think we have any support for that at the moment. I know I've seen issues in the past with either, I don't remember if it was in OpenTelemetry land or Alloy, where to get around that, users just spun up, I think, syslog-ng to kind of act as a proxy that would standardize them to one format. But
Yep, I've looked at that route too. Yeah.
I think there's also an open issue. I can't remember if it's in Alloy or in the upstream Go library. To have an option to like pass raw data in case the provider's supplying non-compliant syslogs, but to be able to still capture that data and not lose it.
Yes, yeah. Currently, we don't support that, but I've seen. I think I've only seen issues in the upstream, not in Alloy, but I might be wrong on that. But yeah, that's definitely something interesting that we can investigate as well. Yeah, at a past work on the OTel syslog receiver, I have seen just how many different, specifically networking devices do syslog contrary to spec. So it's definitely out there as a real issue.
Go ahead, Paul.
I have a random question for the audience. Does anybody happen to use Windows? Because I've been meaning to work on this issue next, the one that I posted on the chat. It's about having some kind of way to set a higher priority for the Alloy process, because some users, they reported issues with Alloy not being able to send Windows-related metrics from the Windows exporter. And apparently, if you set higher priority for the process, it works better. But we don't want it to be the default. So yeah, I just want to raise awareness for this. And if you experience this kind of problem, feel free to leave a comment on the issue, because I'm curious how widespread it is.
Open floor. If anyone has any discussion topics or questions.
If no one else has a topic, do we want to plug what's new in Alloy 1.7? I heard there's some good stuff in there.
Absolutely. Let me go look at the changelog.
Handful of new OpenTelemetry components brought in. TCP log, file log, cumulative to Delta processor. Pretty significant updates to the config syntax with for each.
Let's take a second there. Yeah, does William, Paulin, you want to jump in with for each? What can you give me the elevator pitch for for each?
Yeah, sure. So the idea of for each is you can think of it as like a for loop in your Alloy config file, and you can, with this for loop, like set a collection of items, and for each item you can create a pipeline. So the idea is that some Prometheus exporter, like the Redis one, you would need to have, like you can use discovery, and then for every like discovered Redis instance, you would need to plug a Prometheus Redis exporter. So every time you would have a new instance, you would need then to modify your config. But with this for each statement, now you can plug the discovery into the for each, and then for every Redis discovered instance, it will create like you can configure a Prometheus Redis exporter, and then you can plug this into a scrape Prometheus component, and then into like relabeling, remote write, whatever you need. So, and there are quite a few exporters that works like this. So the idea is like less manual work and more like dynamic work from the Alloy instance.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we're getting closer to Turing complete every day, right?
We also use the the HashiCorp tools quite a bit. Packer, Terraform, Vault, and they all use HCL, the HashiCorp configuration language. Are you guys gonna get to the point where there's a GCL, a Grafana configuration language?
So interestingly enough, the first version of Alloy was a forked version of HCL. Back when it was agent flow mode, or it didn't even have a name back then. So it's definitely some loose inspiration there. But yeah, I think I don't know, it's interesting to look at, and I think we are, we've often had a long tail of things that we kind of want to do that are just from a kind of expand the language and cool perspective. So for each was one of them. Conditionals have been a perennial topic. There's two types of conditionals: conditionals within, like conditionals around components, and conditionals within components.
Yeah, I'm using them right now within templates.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. Yes, sorry. Go ahead, William.
One more thing about the new release. If you're a Windows user, and especially if you're using the Loki source Windows event component, so to collect logs from Windows, then you probably want to upgrade to v1.7. So the release that we just created this week, because there is a massive improvement in terms of CPU usage without any need to modify the config. So you should just be able to upgrade and see no changes in behavior, but just, yeah, massive improvement in terms of CPU.
Speaking of improvements to CPU and memory, Piotr did a pretty big change to optimize our Kubernetes discovery component. So in very large clusters, we would see that consumes a lot of CPU and a lot of memory. So this certainly took a good chunk out of it and made it a lot more performant. We're still going to keep an eye on it and see what we can do to improve it, but we've seen some great gains there. So if you're running a large Kubernetes deployment, you can see some gains there. We've got users who are running tens of thousands of nodes and hundreds of thousands of pods, and that can be a pretty big bear when dealing with kind of that scope and size. Sorry, Sam, I interrupted you as you were kind of cruising through the list there. If you want to see if there's anything else that kind of catches your eye.
I think I touched on. I think between all the conversations, we touched on the big ones. I don't think it's a long change log. The release notes only show breaking and features, but then significant number of enhancements and bug fixes. So should be some just improved resourcing and stability and all kinds of nice stuff.
And we'll be shipping a 1.71, I assume today or tomorrow. Today, I assume, because I think it's being built as we speak. That mainly does with that mentioned I mentioned before with the Kubernetes discovery. We found that there were some regressions. So Piotr has got that in there. And then there were some performance issues with the Prometheus write queue that we found in testing. So I made some changes there. So that should roll out today. Is anyone going to an ObsCon or GrafanaCon?
Walking distance from my apartment.
Oh, which one? Or
One in
where? Which
Seattle.
city?
Seattle.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think any of us are currently slated to be there, but if we do show up, feel free to hit us up.
Will do.
I'll be at the ObsCon in Chicago in 2 weeks. Lord, that's coming up. So if you happen to be there, feel free to give a shout out. Find me. All right, other topics. All right. If no one has anything else, we'll get done right at the 30-minute mark and get everybody back 30 minutes. I appreciate everybody showing up, and I hope you have a fantastic day.